So for the first question, let's go to this lineup for Dr. Craig.
Hey, Dr. Craig. I want to say that I hope God is a humanist. Whatever he says, it's moral, either because he says it by him saying it makes it moral, or it's moral because it has an effect on our reality. It has some sort of effect on our reality. Now, if it has an effect on our reality, then we can see it, we can feel it. It is part of our existence. And so if it has effect on reality, and we can see it, and we can sense it, then why can't we be the authority on morality instead of God? Why can't we be the ones? The only difference is that we want it instead of God wanting it.
Well, I think the answer is because simply if God does not exist, then human beings are just a relatively advanced species of primate. And as such, they're not anything special in the universe. They're just a blind evolutionary product of animals, and animals aren't moral agents. So,
Special.
Excuse me?
Why is God special? Why does he have the right to make moral judgments?
Well, by definition, God is the greatest conceivable being. If anything were greater than that, then that would be God. So by definition, God is the greatest conceivable being. And moral goodness is a great-making property. So God, by definition, is morally perfect, morally good being. And so you have to get to some sort of ultimate absolute, and it seems to me that this would be God. And I think God is a humanist, as you would like to put it. God affirms the value of human beings who are persons, created persons in his image. But you see, if there is no God, then we're just primates, we're just animals. And there's...
Find one thing I said here. I said it would be arbitrary him saying things if it's just the fact that he said it that made it moral. I said that it's moral because we can see it in reality. Yeah. So it's almost exist without that.
I think that the argument here is the old Euthyphro argument, which asks, is it moral because God says so, or does God say so because it's moral? And I think that's a false dilemma. I think the correct answer is to say that it's moral because that's the way God is. God's commands, which constitute our moral duties, are based upon his moral nature, which is essentially kind, loving, generous, just, and so forth. And this is the middle way through this Euthyphro dilemma.
Okay, thank you. A question for Dr. Shook from that lineup.
Oh, okay. I'd just like to say that I feel a little bit misled by the topic of the debate. I thought it was going to be a debate on whether God exists, not whether a Christian God exists. And I also, my question for Dr. Shook is that, okay, so I understand that your definition of a naturalist is someone who bases their beliefs on science and experience, and the third one was?
Reason?
Reason, right, okay. So, and you said that basically, in a summary, being unable...
Do you have a question with this?
Yes, I do.
Okay, can you ask it?
Being unable to disprove something is not reason enough to accept it as true. That was your argument against believing in God, right?
The position I took was that the supernaturalist occasionally seems very impressed when they've been so imaginatively creative as to hypothesize a God, be it Christian or any other sort of God, that has become completely evidence-proof. In other words, there's nothing that we currently know through experience, reason, or science that could possibly prove it to be false.
Yes, and that leads to my question, is that the basis of science is that being unable to disprove something is like the opposite of that. Like everyone here, assuming you're in university, took up to grade 10 science, where we learned that science is where being unable to disprove something is reason to accept it as true. The law of gravity, the reason to believe the law of gravity is because we cannot disprove gravity. I think everyone here learned that when we were in high school.
Ah, I think I see the confusion here. In order to establish gravity as the most plausible explanation, other hypotheses have to be tested and therefore ruled out as wrong. And that has been very successfully done in favor of the theory that there's a mutually attractive force between any two objects with mass. No other hypothesis that human beings have come up with and tested has been able to adequately explain experimental results. So what we have here is a case of one theory surviving experimental testing. Now, the analogy to religion would be as follows. If religion were in a mood to try to appeal to evidence in a similar way, the various supernaturalist hypotheses would have to undertake the task of making predictions about new things that would be discovered within nature, and then scientists would go out and investigate whether or not those things could in fact be found, and the supernaturalist hypothesis that garnered the most correct experimental predictions while suffering no falsifications would emerge, you see, as the winner. Theology can do this and used to do it in prior centuries, but scientific hypotheses postulating only natural forces, energy, mass, these sorts of things, have consistently proven to be far more persuasive and reasonable for things happening within nature. Evolution sort of was the last straw. So what we have here is a case of reasoning and science demanding, first, are you willing to put your hypothesis under rigorous experimental testing? Modern day theology at the edges doesn't do this anymore. It simply takes whatever science manages to know about nature and then complain that there's still more mystery. We heard much of this tonight. So theology, you know, the analogy between theology and science breaks down completely. I hope this helps clear up a little bit for you how reasoning and science and theology could or should work.
Thank you. Okay, another question for Dr. Craig from this line.
Oh, you're holding it, okay. My question also relates to the matter of objective morality, and I think that you said something that was very true, which was that in order for there to be objective morality, there has to be a standard, an objective standard, a plumb line, you called it, for that objective morality. And what I don't understand is, why can't human nature be that objective standard, the way that we actually are, what actually betters the human condition? You said that programmed values are not objective, but normally when we speak of the word objective in a scientific sense, I would say it is objectively true that you are sitting there. It doesn't matter whether I believe you're sitting there or not. It's true. This doesn't matter. Why can't that be our response to the psychopath who gets pleasure out of killing? Why can't we just say to the psychopath, I'm sorry, but you are wrong that killing is good?
Well, that is what I want to say, but it's difficult for the naturalist to say that. In a sense, this should be a question for Dr. Shook, because it's he, as a naturalist, who says that it is impossible for you to ground absolute moral truths in human beings, human societies, or human life, because there's nothing special about human beings or human life or society on a naturalistic worldview. So I guess the answer to your question is because it's arbitrary. There's simply no reason to invest Homo sapiens and their herd morality that they've evolved in the evolutionary process with the kind of objectivity that you want to invest it in. I in fact, think that this is the humanistic residue of having been raised in Western Christian culture, which has affirmed the intrinsic value of human beings. And it's difficult for folks, once they've let go of God, to let go of the intrinsic value of human beings, which has been based upon belief in God. But it does seem to me that philosophers like Nietzsche and the existentialists and the naturalists like Dawkins and others are quite correct in seeing that once you've let go of God, then human beings are just some relatively advanced primates that have evolved on this speck of dust called planet Earth, lost in the cosmos, and there's simply no reason at all to think that their herd morality is special or objectively true.